Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Planning Committee of the 28th of August 2024. The first item on the agenda, are there any apologies for absence? Councillor Fern.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm substituting for Councillor Galvin.
Thank you. Councillor Hellcross-Scott.
Good evening, Chair. I'm substituting for David Field.
Thank you. Councillor Filmer.
Apologies from Councillor Joy.
Thank you.
He's stuck in traffic up in London.
Okay, thank you. Right, item 2 on the agenda is the record of the meeting held on 11th of July 2024 approved. Thank you. Okay. Bearing in mind the extra information on the supplementary agenda with regards to the planning application, land to east of Woodlands Cemetery, Cornwallis Avenue. Is that approved? Right, moving on to item 3 on the agenda, I can confirm that there aren't any late items which do not appear on the main agenda. Item 4. Do any members have any disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests? No. Oh, yeah.
He might have an interest in the Broadwood one.
Yeah. Hi. Councillor Pearce, do you have any disclosable pecuniary interests? No, okay.
Just on the items to do with Broadwood Road in Chattenden, Parish Council's put a representation in. I'm a member of the Parish Council and I'd like to speak as ward member, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearce. Right, before moving on to the main part of the agenda, Councillor Wildey, Councillor Orrance have asked to speak as ward members on agenda item 5, Gibraltar Farm, and Councillor Pearce has asked to speak as ward member for agenda item 6. Is this agreed by members? Okay. Now moving on to item 5, planning application, Gibraltar Farm. Mary Smith, Senior Planner, is going to present this application. Over to you, Mary.
Thank you. So this is the application site boundary. I don't know how to use it. Sorry. The south-east side follows the Medway boundary with Maidstone. Vehicular access is to Ham Lane to the north. The road junction changes are mainly here within Maidstone, who also have a planning application for the development, and the pedestrian access through to Lordswood is down here. So the site context, I'm sure everyone knows it, but so Lordswood is obviously here, Hempstead is here, and then you've got Lidsing and the M2 down there. So this site has a long planning history. The first outline application was made in 2014 and was refused primarily due to inappropriate development within a locally valued landscape. In 2017, the Secretary of State allowed the appeal against this refusal, finding that the sustainability benefits in the context of a lack of an up-to-date housing land supply outweighed the landscape and other harm. In 2018, an application to renew this original outline planning permission was approved, and this is the indicative layout for that, with only means of access being approved in detail as part of this application, this being from the end of North Dane Way. So you can see the access there. These previous permissions rely on a small strip of land owned by the council, which the council has previously declined to sell, and without this it's not possible to implement this permission. In view of the difficulty in securing the land for the access, a similar application but with an alternative access was submitted in 2019, the current application in effect being a resubmission of this. This shows vehicular access from Ham Lane only at the top here. There's actually 2 access points. It also includes on and off-site highway works, including to the Ham Lane-Lidsing Road junction area, and we'll look at these in more detail later, and the addition of a nursery and a small retail unit on the site. The 2019 application was refused due to access concerns relating to the inadequate links to Lordswood. In 2022, an appeal against this refusal was dismissed. However, the only ground on which this was dismissed was that it had not been demonstrated that the scheme would not adversely affect the local distribution of bat species in relation to the level of lighting needed for the access between the site and North Dane Way. So that's the pedestrian access just up there in the corner. The inspector again recognised the landscape and other harm and the concerns including regarding traffic and safety, flooding, loss of agricultural land and the amount of development proposed in the local area, including Lidsing. However, he only dismissed the appeal on the grounds of this bat concern. The relevant area, as I said, is that corner there, and we'll look at that a little bit later. The current application includes additional information to address that bat concern. Moving on to the details of the current scheme, this is just some examples of the likely 2- and 3-storey nature of the development. It's all indicative because these matters aren't for consideration now. The scheme, as I say, it's only indicative, but it includes reference to that there will be at least a 15-metre buffer to the ancient woodland, which is to the sides and here. This plan shows potential changes within the site itself to public rights of way, the existing being in blue and the proposed in yellow. The right of way through to Lordswood would obviously remain unchanged and would be enhanced. So again, that's that bit with where we talked about the bats and the essential link through to Lordswood. So the site access, the main access and the second access would be to Ham Lane, and Ham Lane would be widened. The existing Ham Lane junction would be stopped up and a new junction formed with Lidsing Road. That's the access into the site, and that's obviously the bit to the east. The junction of Hempstead Road with Lidsing Road would also be altered, with associated changes to Lidsing Road up to Capstan Road. There would also be improvements to junction 4 of the M2, these primarily relating to vehicles leaving the M2 onto Hoath Way. Hoath Way roundabout improvements include the introduction of a third lane on approaches to the roundabout from Hoath Way to the south and Sharsted Way to the west, and a pedestrian crossing added at Hoath Way to the south. Chapel Lane improvements include an additional lane for vehicles turning onto Hempstead Valley Drive. And Westfield Soul Road improvements show the provision of 3 vehicle passing bays in the middle section of the road, all within the Maidstone Borough Council area. We've already seen this slide, but just to remind of the location of the pedestrian and cycle link through to Lordswood, which is this section here. This is the key area in respect of the dismissed appeal for this development in 2022. The inspector agreed that this direct link to Lordswood is essential. So it's this section here. This is North Dane Way. The inspector also agreed with the council that for it to work and be well used, suitable lighting would be required. However, the impact of these alterations on the local bat population was not fully known, and the appeal was dismissed on this basis alone. The These photos show the existing right-of-way to be improved to get a view through to the main part of the site. 2 6-metre high lighting columns could achieve the level of lighting required for the link to the site. Further bat survey work has been submitted, and the Council's Ecology Specialist Advisor has confirmed that, whilst in the short term the lighting could result in a small number of bats altering their flight patterns, it would not create an impenetrable barrier across the woodland, and that sufficient information has now been provided such that the objection on this ground has now been overcome. In view of the time lapse, the proposal has also been reviewed with regard to any change in circumstances since this previous appeal decision, as well as since the initial submission of this application in 2021. This includes a review of the transport implications, with a further technical note on highways queries having been submitted in July this year, and a review of Section 106 contribution levels. No new issues have been identified, such that permission should now be refused on another ground. Subject to the conditions and Section 106 contributions detailed in the report, it is therefore recommended that planning permission be granted, with the sole reason for the previously dismissed appeal having now been overcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I now will move over to Ward Member Councillor Wildey, who has 5 minutes to speak.
Good evening.
You'll be able to see your 5 minutes up on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you. To be honest, with my reading glasses, I can barely see the screen, so if I go over, shout at me, but I shouldn't. Right, good evening. The reason I believe that any decisions on this application should be either rejected or at least postponed, there's a few of them. The local people are supposed to have been informed of this latest proposal. I've had an email from the family at Gibraltar Farm Cottages. They did not receive any notification, so how can we be sure that the relevant people that are affected by this did receive anything? All of the reports in your report have been completed and reviewed some time ago. None of the reports could have taken account of the Gleaming Wood development. You mentioned the West Seoul Road and the improvements to there. There's recently been a site nearing completion of considerable number of houses which will affect many of the issues, and it's not mentioned at all in the report. This isn't a possible or a proposed development as some of the others. This is something that's now in brick, standing there, shortly to have people take possession of their homes. If you care about the ecology, this newly built development will add to the lighting, the noise, the pedestrians, use of cars, etc., etc. All of this will affect the bats and the flights of their bats. Now, it might seem a small point, but that's my understanding is the only issue that's still up for debate. And, you know, if the bats were deemed as important previously, they should still be seen as important, and the lights are going to affect, from the new development, the flight patterns of the bats. Protection of the ancient woodland. This site in Maidstone is within half a mile or closer to the bat flights, as I've said, and to Gibraltar Farm, and will be considered, sorry, I've said that bit. The footpath and cycling to Broadwood will affect, again, the bat's flight, and in North Dane Way, where this path ends up, there used to be lighting along the stretch by the path underneath the road. That was taken away, and when I complained about how dark that left the area, I was told we couldn't put any lighting in because that would affect the bats directly. So if a road which is a walking footpath and cycle routes cannot be lit because it's going to affect the bats, and if it's good enough reason not to have lighting there, it's a good enough reason not to have lighting across the open fields. As Kent Wildlife Trust say, a number of these concerns are not addressed, and further information is needed. I think that's on page 43. There are, as I say, a lot of the reports in here are between 10 years and 2 years since they've been reviewed. By the report, it doesn't say they've been reviewed more recently than that. But unless they've all been reviewed in that time, we need fresh reports, especially anything that concerns the bats. Now, I live in Lordswood, not far from where this site will be. When that was all built and the surrounding houses, we were all told that it wouldn't be flooded because they had done mitigation, proper drainage, and on the top of the hill. Now, Gibraltar Farm is not the top of the hill by any means and does get very wet. So I believe there's a greater risk of flooding.
Thank you, Councillor Wilder. Your 5 minutes is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Lawrence, if you'd like to come forward now as ward member, you have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee, for the opportunity to speak on this planning application. So the long-running saga of Gibraltar Farm is back before this committee. The bats are satisfied and the dormice provided for. However, what is missing is no provision for the impact of this scheme on the residents of the ward I represent and reside in, Hempstead and Wigmore. Not a single word in the document before you attempts to minimise the changes that will occur to the character of Hempstead Village and the impact of the traffic flows and strain on the infrastructure that Gibraltar Farm will bring. The creeping urbanisation of our part of Medway will undoubtedly go as far as the area of outstanding natural beauty in my lifetime. When considering this application, please bear in mind the development of Blowers Wood, East Hill, the Lazybones site and the new development that enters into Gleaming Wood Road, approximately 200 homes, all of which will impact the area around Gibraltar Farm. The committee will also note that Hempstead and Lawswood will also have to absorb another 2,500 homes as part of the proposed local plan. My principal objections are around the traffic. The traffic measures submitted by the applicant and accepted by the planning team suggest that Ham Lane, West Sole Road, Forge Lane, Capstan Road, all effectively single carriageway roads, are capable of handling the additional traffic flows generated by the site and the other sites I previously mentioned. Hempstead Road, Chapel Lane, Hempstead Valley Road, Sharsted Way and the roundabout at the junction of Sharsted Way and Hoath Way must cope with minor alterations, notwithstanding the fact that the traffic already queues along Sharsted Way to access Hoath Way and likewise via Wigmore Road into Hoath Way. Residents I have spoken to have noticed an increase in traffic as the investments made in Hempstead Valley Shopping Centre attract more visitors. The Marks and Spencer's entrance to Hempstead Valley only has room for 5 or 6 vehicles to queue before the traffic blocks and starts queuing along Sharsted Way back towards Hoath Way. There's been an increase in traffic pulling off the M2 junction and flowing into Medway, and the inevitable impact on queuing times for cars trying to access Hoath Way from Sharsted Way. Hempstead Road itself is barely passable in the mornings and the afternoons as parents pick up their children from Hempstead schools, and parking has a significant impact on traffic flows. During the construction phase, the constant flow of heavy traffic will degrade the air quality and cause considerable congestion in all directions as materials are transported to the site. This is bound to impact Hempstead, Bredhurst, Lidsing, Capstan and Boxley for many, many months. Whilst public transport can minimise the impact of the additional traffic, the fact is that without significant investment in high quality bus services that actually turn up and actually run on time, the car will be the main mode of transport for leisure, getting to work and the school run. Hempstead lacks a functioning doctor's surgery where we once had two. Medway Hospital is struggling to provide an adequate service to residents. Whilst the plan includes a new nursery, local primary schools, Hempstead, Lawswood and Parkwood may struggle to cope with the additional demand created by families moving into the area. The car park at Rainham Station is pretty much full on all work days. Before I finish, I'd like to comment on the allocation of Section 106 funds. A paltry £99,000 is allocated to improving the lives of residents who already live in Hempstead and Lawswood. All Section 106 funds should be allocated, reducing the impact of the site on the residents of Hempstead and Lawswood. Now, I understand where we are with this planning application and the enormous amount of legal money spent on stopping the development. But any solution pits Hempstead against Lawswood in terms of impact. And I would ask that if the committee agrees with me, they reject the application, but also from a strategic perspective, consider the developments of Gibraltar Farm and Lidsing are for all intents and purposes one single scheme, and that the necessary road infrastructure is in place before the house building commences. The committee should accept the additional road from the junction to the M2 through North to North Way as the only workable solution. For that to happen, the committee should, I hope, reject the application, but in the worst case scenario, adjourn this application to allow for negotiations to sell the Ransom Strip at North Dane Way to the landowner and the road schemes described in this report redesigned to only allow very limited access from Gibraltar Farm to Hempstead.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. I now open the floor to members. Any members? Councillor Howcroft-Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a little bit troubled and concerned by this development. I have to say, as the ward councillor for Luton, we have had a lot of development at the Wayfield end of Luton Road, which has impeded on residents in Nelson Terrace and Hopeview Drive in terms of major flooding in 2018 and 2023, where residents, many of them vulnerable, have had to leave their housing, and some of them are still not back from the 2023 episode. When I visited Hopeview Drive after the most recent flooding, I believe even me with my disabilities could have done a bit of whitewater rafting down Hopeview Drive, and that's not acceptable for the residents of Medway. I'm also concerned about noise and disturbance during the construction, capacity of the local infrastructure for our public and our citizens of Medway, NHS, traffic, drainage, road safety, highways impact, impact on the environment, the negative impact on our conservation. Bats are a protected species, Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981. The impact on the environment, this is greenfield sites, character and appearance of the area, the design and the overdevelopment. And when we're talking about lighting, I care about the whole of our community, but obviously as a vulnerable woman, I care very much about the vulnerability and safety of women and girls, and lighting is key to that, and research shows that from Women's Aid, from community safety projects, and from the Police Crime and Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Gilbourne.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, I represent the residents of Hempstead and Wigmore, and I represent their concerns about this development, mainly because of the access onto Hempstead Road that got changed rather than coming off North Dane Way, which is what they thought originally was going to happen. And because this has been presented very much as a development extending Lordswood, and all the services really promoted in Lordswood, it just seems completely bizarre that all these people who will come to this development will have to get in their car and come out through the edge of Hempstead and all the way around West Sol Road or down Ham Lane and get to Lordswood services that way. They just won't. They'll come to Hempstead. The reality is that if it is a Lordswood development, there should be a road from the development into Lordswood and not into Hempstead. I think the developer or the landowner recognises that he would much prefer the first option that was put forward years ago to go through North Dane Way. And the fact that it was against the local plan at the time, I can understand why it was rejected. Whether it's classed as a ransom strip or not, I'm sure it's not beyond the wit of planners to be able to keep the ransom strip but also allow access through it from North Dane Way to the development. But of course the big elephant in the room is the Lidsing development, which many people across Wigmore and Hempstead are very much against, not just because it's Maidstone, but just because it's again a loss of the green fields area, which many of them moved to Hempstead and Wigmore for that very reason, because it's on the edge of the countryside, and that will be lost if this Lidsing development goes ahead. As many of you know, that there's an appeal by Bredhurst Parish Council, which is being heard in the middle of September, which, if granted, it means that the local plan by Maidstone Borough Council will have to be reassessed because they're challenging some of the things that the inspector put into the local plan, which weren't really sufficient. And one of them is this access from North Dane Way, that if Medway Council continued to block it and not sell the ransom strip, that the existing roads would eventually cope with the traffic. Well, it's just bizarre that there's 2,500 homes coming in Lidsing, that they could cope with the existing roads as they are now. And this is one of the reasons the Bredhurst Parish Council are taking them to court. So I think it should be deferred until a lot of this detail is known, whether the Lidsing development will be reviewed, whether that will be delayed, but also with the other developments. It just seems bizarre that Hempstead is having to make a lot of small changes to its access, changes to roads, particularly around Chapel Lane and Hoath Way, which just don't seem necessary when if access was off North Dane Way, it would be a far simpler project and would make much more sense for the residents of the new development. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and I'd like to comment favourably on the officer presentation, which was one of the clearest I've heard, which also outlined the highway mitigation measures, which, as other members have commented, are important, the M2 junction, etc. The difficulty we're in as a planning committee, I think, Chair, is that we've already lost on appeal on previous applications. Were we to defer this application tonight, as some members have suggested, we'd face a possible appeal for non-determination. Were we to refuse it, we'd face a possible appeal, and presumably it having gone to appeal previously, although I'm open to be corrected by the Chief Planning Officer, we might well be liable for costs. And whilst that should never be an overriding consideration, it is nevertheless something that we've got to keep in the back of our minds. So this is one of the most comprehensive, as I say, presentations and conditions an S106 agreement has set out that I've ever seen. The only plea I would make on the Section 106 agreement, which includes comprehensive, as I say, commitments on things like nursery places and SEND, special educational needs provision, the plea I would make is that we ensure that the NHS contribution is utilised as soon as possible and that officers use their good offices if this application is approved tonight to ensure that that is the case, because for a very long time, for very long periods, we wait with applications for the NHS to fulfil the necessary requirements to provide the buildings or make the provision that is set out in S106 agreements generally. So with that, recognise the points that have been made on flooding, and I've spoken outside of this application. I've spoken to the flood relevant council officer recently about some of the issues in the area, such as those that Councillor Howcroft-Scott has outlined, and one of the many conditions in this application is on surface water infiltration. So in my view, Chair, we've just got to be very careful that if we want to refuse the application, we've got pretty solid grounds for doing so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Any other member? Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I listened very carefully to the ward members, and there's not much more I can add that they put forward. I think the big thing with this application is the infrastructure, and I'm very mindful of what's coming with Lidsing, and this is perhaps a little bit too early, and I think there's a better scheme around the corner that we could do rather than this one. I do understand all the things the ward council have said. Anyone who knows the roads around there will appreciate there's a lot of work to get that to flow properly around there. So probably won't be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Filmer. Is there any other member? Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Chair. I'm always a bit nervous that I've actually missed a detail in the report, so I'm just scanning it again. So forgive me if it's there and I've missed it. Is there any attempt at all to give some kind of idea what is an anticipated increase in traffic level, please? And with, so I skipped the page, the outline of contributions, which to me, at their first impression, they seemed quite extensive. Is that deemed to be adequate by officers as well, please? Thank you.
Yeah, hand over to Dave, Chief Planning Officer.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Completely understand all the points that have been made in relation to this application. I'd just like to come back on a number of things, and then also in relation to the principle. Firstly, in relation to Section 106 contributions, and I'm grateful to Councillor Jones on this. There's a significant cover here in Section 106s, which exceeds our developer contributions guide. I was doing a quick calculation this evening on this. The Section 106 asks for equates to about £14,500 per property. That exceeds the figure in our developer contributions guide. In relation to Councillor Jones' point on the NHS, totally understand that point. I've got a meeting with the NHS very shortly in September, where we'll be talking to them about their reorganisation they're going through, which will assist in terms of Section 106 spend. They will also be talking to me about the local plan and their asks within that. Flood issues, completely understand the flood problem. Like Councillor Howcroft-Scott, I've met those local residents there, and I totally understand and have sympathy with them. In relation to this development, though, as Councillor Jones points out, our flood officer and the conditions here will satisfy that flood problem won't be exacerbated by this development. This development will address its own needs and not cause a further exacerbation of those issues. I just wanted to go back a little bit, Chairperson, if I can, on the history here. Now, Mary articulated it really, really well. The original application for this site was refused by this planning committee. I thought we had a good chance on appeal. It went to a public inquiry, expensive public inquiry. We defended it very strongly. The inspector then said, yes, there is a landscape impact for this development. However, you've not got a 5-year housing land supply in Medway, and your local plan is out of date. I'm going to allow this development. Now, Medway has stopped that development from going forward because of the ransom strip. And I appreciate the point that Councillor Gilbourne has said, is there no other access? And because of the ancient woodland, they need the ransom strip to get the access into it. It is the better scheme. The applicant recognises it's the better scheme. We all recognise it's the better scheme, but the council have stopped that on 2 occasions. So the applicant has understandably then gone to an alternative. Now, the other thing I would say in relation to, and members will know this, East Hill was refused by this planning committee. It's just down the road on North Down Way, was refused by this planning committee. I thought, again, it was appealed. I thought we would have a good case on appeal in terms of landscape harm there. It's a much more sensitive site even than this one. Again, the inspector said, a different inspector, allowed that appeal and said, yes, there is landscape harm. It can be mitigated to a degree by, as the landscaping is undertaken on site and it matures, but you haven't got a 5-year housing land supply and you haven't got an up-to-date local plan. So I'm telling members everything that they already know here. In relation to the most recent application on this site, which this effectively is a renewal of, or a new submission of, which seeks to address that ransom strip issue. That application was refused on one ground only, as Mary articulated really, really well, which was about that making it, to make the development sustainable, it needed a link from this site to Lordswood, so they could get to the shops, so they could get to the schools, so they could get to the leisure centre, so they could get to doctor's surgery. The footpath there needed to be made usable 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for all the reasons that Councillor Howcroft-Scott said, for safety reasons. So it needed to be resurfaced and it needed to be lit. Now, we weren't convinced at the time of the previous application that the lighting they were proposing would make the use of the route safe. And similarly, if they did up the lighting to the level we thought it would, what impact would that have on ecology? They didn't provide enough information for us there to be satisfied on that. The inspector considered all those issues. They also considered all the other issues that were raised by residents and other groups in relation to that appeal. So highway capacity, highway issues, landscape, all those things were considered by the inspector. At the end of the day, the inspector came down on the side of our really good consultants. We appointed some lighting specialists. We appointed some bat specialists, not just ecology people, but bat specialists who looked at this. The inspector said, wasn't satisfied that it could be proven that there would be no harm to ecology, and particularly to bats. The applicants have gone away. They've looked at this further. They've worked with our consultants. They've shown that they can get the lighting in that we require to make it safe, as Councillor Howcroft-Scott has said, but in a way which will not impact on the bats. And our consultants have now said to me, we're happy, Dave. We're happy this, and if you were to refuse on this grounds, we will not represent you at a public inquiry because we're satisfied on those grounds now, and that you won't win. Now, members, there are a few other facts I think you are aware of. We've got not a very good record. We have spent more money, legal fees, defending public inquiries in the last 3 years than any other council in the country. That's a lot of public money that's been spent on that. Now, I'm very happy to go to appeal if I think we can win. But in this instance, I don't think there are valid planning grounds to refuse this application. Now, in relation to that, planning inspector, even if the applicant didn't apply for costs against you, inspectors now have the power to award costs for what they consider to be unreasonable behaviour. Now, in this instance, if you were to refuse it on the ecology grounds or lighting grounds, I haven't got someone who will defend those grounds, so that's unreasonable behaviour and we'd have a cost award against it. If you were to refuse it on other grounds, what an inspector would look at is, okay, you've come up with new grounds that you didn't argue before. Where's your evidence to back that up? And I haven't got evidence to back that up, and you'll have costs awarded against you. And that happened on a case recently out at Fairview Avenue in Wigmore, where you refused a second application, but introduced, the committee introduced new reasons for refusal. Inspector said, you can't back it up, you've introduced new reasons for refusal that you didn't argue before, I'm allowing the appeal and I'm awarding costs against you. So members, whilst I agree with Councillor Gilbourne, I agree with Councillor Lawrence, there is a better scheme. That's not before us tonight. Members, there are no valid planning grounds for refusing this application based on all the experts we've had looking at all the evidence on this. If you resolve to approve it, subject to the section 106, Maidstone still have to consider the element which is within their part. The section 106 will take some time to finalise. Maidstone's application will take some time to determine. They were waiting for us. The council may decide to make a different decision on the ransom strip, but that's not a consideration. That's not a planning consideration for this application. But it just may mean that there is time for those negotiations. But you've got to determine this application on its merits, members. And I'm sorry, there are no planning grounds to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Looking at the previous planning applications for this site, in principle, it has been accepted that this site can be developed for residential purposes. We find ourselves in this situation due to the council not having an up-to-date local plan and it also does not have a 5-year land supply. This application is a resubmission of the application that was refused by the Secretary of State, where the inspector found that it had not been demonstrated that the scheme would not adversely affect the local distribution of bat species. This resubmission includes additional information to address these concerns. With this in mind, I will be voting for this application. If we were to refuse this application, it could come to a great cost to the council. I will now hand over to the Vice Chair, Councillor Jones. Oh, sorry. Councillor Filmer. Oh, sorry, Fern.
Thank you, Chair. Before you do, just to pick up on the points that the ward members have made, I mean, Councillor Lawrence has made a request there in terms of some of the infrastructure improvements in the highways improvements. I mean, do we think that's enough? Do we, you know, the 106 agreements are good, they're comprehensive. This is probably the best set of 106 agreements I've seen on a planning application. Very well laid out, and there's a lot there to sort of support the growth. But is it enough? You know, is it enough? And can we go with the proposal that Councillor Lawrence made that some of these improvements are done before we allow the development? Is that possible?
Chair, thank you very much. I think come back on a couple of things there, Councillor Fern. It's a really good point, and lots of residents in our local plan exhibitions are saying to me, we understand housing need, We really, really do understand housing need. We understand the pressures there. Our 22-year-old children are still living at home with us, you know, because they can't afford to somewhere, you know, homelessness, all these other things. So a lot of residents are saying to me, we totally understand the housing need. However, we need the infrastructure for it, the very point that you're saying, and Councillor Lawrence said very well. We have this package of Section 106s, which will deliver those improvements. There are also a number of conditions which relate to those highway improvements and say certain things can't be done until those highway improvements are undertaken. So I'm satisfied, and our highway consultant is satisfied, that with the Section 106 we've got and with those conditions, that we will get the infrastructure that will make this development acceptable. And I use the word carefully there, acceptable. I'm not saying it's the greatest development ever. I'm not going to argue with Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Wildey that this won't cause an impact on Hempstead. Yes, there will be an impact. I'm not going against that. But the Section 106 and the conditions packages together will deliver the infrastructure needed in the time that meets current legislation. Now, one of the things in our local plan going forward will be, when we allocate sites in the local plan, we will be able to be much clearer on what infrastructure is needed when, then. So again, it emphasises the need and desperate need for a local plan. But hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Fern.
Did you want to come back?
Yeah, if I can. Bearing in mind that this is probably going to be quite a lengthy process, you know, so this is agreed tonight, there's still a lot of obstacles to overcome, and the chances are it's going to take some time before the development's built. And you'll know what, apologies, and you'll know what application I refer to when I say this, Dave, but we gave 106 monies for highways improvements previously, and when it actually came to implementing them, there wasn't sufficient funds because there wasn't enough money. You know, materials had increased. You know, how do you sort of anticipate this with this? You know, so this drags on for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You know, where do we stand then?
Chairperson, thank you very much. I think two things there, Councillor Fern, and as you say, I do know the development you're referring to and understand the point very well. I think two things. One, in terms of the Section 106 contributions as well, and the Section 106, that will be that those figures will go up every year in accordance with the interest rates. But the other thing, and the great thing here in terms of the conditions in relation to highway improvements are essentially, it says those highway improvements have got to be undertaken by such and such a time, or no more development can happen. So it's very clear they will be delivered as a result of those conditions. Thank you.
Councillor Hellcross-Scott, did you want to speak?
If I may, Chair, yes. I would also like to thank Mary for it's so comprehensive and easy to read, and, you know, I found that really useful. I have listened to Mary and Dave, and I think we have to vote in favour of this, really. And, you know, I blame the lily-livered Tories who never delivered local plan, and so I'm glad it's their ward and not mine.
Councillor Barrett.
Oh, yes, thank you. Going on from Councillor Fern's comments regards to 106, there has been situations, you know, particularly there was one in Raynham where there was an agreement for a 106, and as time went by, I think it was Churchill, the developer, they felt they hadn't got sufficient funds to pay it. Whereas at the time I felt, you know, myself just being a small businessman, if things increase in value, you have to increase your price, you sell your properties at a bit of a dearer price. But no, just the 106 was completely scrubbed out. I would say, could this happen here? Because we're very much swayed by the 106, it would seem today.
Chairperson, thank you very much. And again, I totally understand the point that Councillor Barrett is making very well. The sites that developers come back and occasionally to argue viability are the ones where they're incurring costs which they hadn't anticipated. And they're the brownfield sites. I've never, in all my time, had anybody come back and argue viability on a greenfield site, which is what this is.
Because it's always the first time.
Thank you. Councillor Gilbourne.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to come back with the point about North Dane Way. And like I said, the elephant in the room, particularly for us in Hempstead, is the Lidsing development. On the assumption that goes ahead, within the Lidsing plan, it assumes that North Dane Way will extend to the M4, all the way down, really due south, really, on the edge of the development. So if we approve this tonight, and there's plans for a different access on Ham Lane, and the changes at the end of Hempstead Road and Lidsing Road, then if the implementation of the Lidsing development goes ahead, the council have got to make a decision at some point that they will sell the Ransom Strip to Maidstone Council to allow this to go through. And it's going to happen that the more major road is going down to the, just to the west of the development, all the way down to Junction 4. So all this extra work on the edge of Hempstead will be superfluous. That's my understanding. I don't know if Dave wants to comment.
Councillor Peake.
Yes, through you, Chair, may I ask Dave, is it possible, or to what extent can we police the activity of the application of the 106 money? So, following on what's been said across the floor, could you ever have a case where they would argue that there's no point in spending this money because there won't be enough to complete the work? Has that ever happened? Because I'm always conscious about people trying it on and trying to get away with it, and that's why I use the terminology policing this to make sure that they don't use that as an excuse not to go ahead and spend the money.
Yeah, over to you, Dave.
Chairperson, in relation to Section 106 on greenfield sites, as I said, this is £14,400 or £14,500 per dwelling. I understand Councillor Barrett's point that there's a first time for everything. I will be shocked. Is too small. The likelihood of this site being unviable for those Section 106 is minuscule. To be complete 99.999 recurring, unlikely to happen. In relation to the point that you've said, Councillor Peake, the Section 106 is monitored very carefully by my Rottweiler of an officer, Jill King. She makes sure they pay on time. She then makes sure that the people who it's been paid towards, i.e. education or open space, spend it within the time period, because there's a payback period. The only time where, the only thing that worries me a little bit is the point that Councillor Jones has made in relation to the NHS, because they're outside of the council. And we need to make sure they're spending on time. And we're working really hard with them. They're identifying schemes. We've just got to get them to spend the money on time. So far, I've never had to pay a penny back to a developer. Now, developers now pay on time. There is that payback period, whereby if we don't spend it on what it should be spent on within 5 years, 10 years, they could ask for the money back. We always make sure it's spent on what it should be. So the onus is on us. But Jill King, you've probably met her. The developers quake at the sight of her. She makes sure they pay up every single penny and more.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Hammond-Shea.
Thank you very much. It's a very difficult subject to talk about, really. And I do want to thank the council for representing and trying to push back as strongly as possible on this application. Just so that we don't feel like it's a fait accompli taking place here, I do welcome the robust questioning that we have at play here. The two that spring to mind that I don't think have been answered fully enough for me to make an informed decision. One is about consultation with residents and notifying them of this new development piece. I think one of the colleagues mentioned that earlier. I want to know any confirmation that that process has been followed, that due process, and residents have been notified throughout the journey of what's happening. And the second one is about the Section 106 as it relates to NHS provisions. I understand that you have a conversation with NHS tomorrow. What do you seek to achieve with that meeting that takes place after this, this session here?
Dave, do you want to come back?
Yeah, Chairperson, thank you very much. In relation to consultation, I can absolutely categorically say that the consultation undertaken by my team, Mary and my validation team, is in accordance with our practices. So in terms of site notices, press notices, consultations. And I think that's clearly demonstrated by the fact that 790 people commented on the application. So someone saying that they didn't know about the application, well, 790 people commented on the application. Also, the person who wrote the email saying that they had not been directly consulted, Mary's checked the file, they've commented on the application. So they may not have seen a letter through their letterbox. They certainly knew about the application by the way that we undertook the consultation, site notices, press notices, word of mouth, social media, all those things. They knew about the application and they commented upon it. In relation to the Section 106 and the NHS, Councillor Maple, Councillor Khan, Councillor Curry, myself are working really hard with the NHS to make sure that when we get money for them, that it's spent on what it should be. Now, they're very good at asking for it. We're very good at getting it for them. There's still more work that they've got to do to make sure they spend it. Now, we all know the difficulties the NHS are in, but it's one of the first comments made to me by residents when they're looking at new development. What about doctors? We can't get an appointment. We have to wait weeks. And you know, like everybody around this room that lives in Medway, we understand those comments. So we're meeting with the NHS. We're talking to them about their restructure that they're going through, how they're going to convince us that they are going to spend the money on what it should be to mitigate the impacts of development such as this. But that shouldn't stop us asking for the money, you know, them asking for the money and us asking for them. We just now need to work with them to make sure it's spent on what it should be to mitigate these developments.
Thank you, Dave. Any other member? I now hand over to Vice Chair, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I move the recommendations. Recommendation A, approval subject to A, the provision S106 agreement being entered into to secure the following. A, the provision of 25% affordable housing. B, financial contributions as set out in the report. And recommendation B, the imposition of the following conditions 1 to 58 as set out in the report. I so move, Chair.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you. Those for? Thank you. Those against? Thank you. The application is approved. Now moving on to agenda item 6, planning application for 24 Broadwood Road. Peter Hockney, Service Manager, is going to present this application. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good evening, members. As you can see, this application site is 24 Broadwood Road in Chattenden. The site on this plan is outlined in red. If I can find the cursor, which seems disappeared. There it is. Outlined in red. within the sort of as I say, within Broadwood Road, and it backs onto this area to the rear, which you'll see in the photographs a bit later. The application is a retrospective application and is for a detached outbuilding to the rear part of the garden and to be used for purposes ancillary to the main dwelling, which is located at the front of the plot. You can see here the photographs of the outbuilding as built. You can see the rear of the building here with the eaves line slightly above the fence line onto the sort of footpath to the rear. And then this is the view from within the garden. Members will notice the porch structure, I think, which is currently in place. The proposed plans, which are these ones, propose the removal of that porch structure so that it looks less domesticated, so it looks less bulky, and it reduces the overall impact of the development to one of a much more typical single-storey outbuilding within the garden. Condition 2 within the recommendation requires that porch structure to be removed within 2 months of permission being granted, if members decide to grant this evening. And condition 3 requires the use, as I say, to be incidental to the main dwelling, so that it's not used for purposes which are such as a separate dwelling, which would cause greater impact on the neighbouring properties, which, as you can see, are similar in size and scale in terms of the gardens and the plot dimensions. And I think that's probably all to say on this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Now over to Councillor Pearce as ward member, who has 5 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I promise this will be a short one for me. This is one of those applications, again, where it's a local resident who is the applicant. Local residents are putting in their feedback. So this isn't a application with a faceless developer or corporation. They're all my residents, and I like to take the view that I look at this objectively and fairly. I do agree with the conditions. I think they're very helpful, especially one with reducing the scale of the development with the porch being removed. I think that's good. And also the condition regarding the development only being used for non-business related use. I think that's helpful. So part of me is a bit, as a ward councillor and as a local resident, a bit annoyed that this is retrospective, but as we understand, we have to look at retrospective applications as if they are fresh applications, and we have to treat them fairly. We can't punish an applicant for doing a retrospective application. We have to look at it on its own merits. So those conditions are good. The only thing I would mention is that it is quite a large structure. It's 4.4 metres in height, and I'll probably be told about the local plan being 20 years out of date, etc. But in that plan, it does say on paragraph 3.4 that extensions of residential infill development should not result in overdevelopment of plots, nor unduly reduce available garden or amenity areas, which I think this does do, but I'm sure I'll be told it's 20 years out of date, that plan. I've checked also with the neighbourhood plan, which has now got significant weight. I've noticed that in the report, which is very good, but there's no policies in there that would restrict, would object to this, and neither would the MPPF as well. If you actually look at if you go onto the street view at all, or if you've been there yourself, and look for the gaps between the houses, you can actually see the new houses opposite on the development in the adjacent field. So this isn't massively overbearing. It's quite significant in terms of the plot and the size of the garden, but I can't see a strong enough reason to refuse it, but I'm happy with the conditions in that regard. But another part of me, which without my planning hat on, is saying I'm a bit annoyed that it's retrospective. And I'm concerned that, you know, other properties could follow suit with similar buildings, but they will be judged individually as they come, I suspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Any member? Councillor Howcroft-Scott?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't like planning in retrospect either. I think they should be fined £50 for the NHS or something like that. I understand from having read the paperwork, and thank you for your comprehensive presentation and papers, that the Dickens and Country Protective Society have written some objections. I think I'm right in understanding, but please correct me if I'm wrong, that you have addressed those by how you're, I mean, because it's a massive structure, isn't it? How you're kind of scaling that down. Can I just clarify that, please?
Over to you, Peter.
Thank you. Yes, that's the purpose of the two conditions, is to sort of help to overcome those concerns, both in terms of the scale and the reduction of the sort of porch element, which, as you can see, is an oversized development for what is a more typical garden building, essentially. And then the second element that they raised concerns about was about potential commercial use, and again the other condition restricts that use. So I take Councillor Pearce's point about the height of the structure in terms of its sort of 4.5 or 4.4 metres to ridge. I think one of the key matters is the eaves height. The eaves height is relatively low. It's one of those design sort of changes that they've gone for a more rural, sort of close to 45-degree pitch roof, which ultimately increases the overall height of the ridge. Sometimes you'd see developments where they'd put a shallower pitch on to reduce the height, but you'd probably get less of a rural interpretation of the design. So it is that sort of choice, and to my mind, there's no harm that's caused by the higher ridge height as a result of the pitch of the roof. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Fern?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've no issue with the application. I think what they're proposing to do is actually going to improve the appearance of it. I have a question around the representations we received. So I note that one of the neighbours was fully in favour of it, but the other one asked a series of questions. How do we deal with that when they come in? So how were them questions answered to the consultee there?
Okay, over to you, Peter.
Thank you. As you can appreciate, in terms of representations that received that ask questions, I think as demonstrated by the previous application, it's not possible with the resources available to reply with detailed answers to questions raised in representations. So in order to deal with those and address those, it's looking at them within the report and within the decision-making process. So obviously, as you can see from the matters that comment has raised, it's about the use, it's about hours of operation, noise and ventilation. So by restricting it to ancillary to the dwelling and to prevent commercial use, that essentially addresses those concerns through that manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Okay, hand over to Vice Chairperson, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Move approval with conditions. 1 to 3, I think, are set out in the report. I so move.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Those for?
That's 11, Chair.
Those against? That's not.
No.
Okay. The application is therefore approved. Moving on to item 7. Oh, sorry, I'll just wait for Councillor Pearce to come back. Sorry. Right, now moving on to item 7, planning application 46 Cloisterham Road. Jonathan Simon, planning officer, is going to present this application. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Many of you will be familiar with this application, 46 Cloisterham Road, as this was reported to the last committee where you made the decision to defer it for a site visit. That site visit was undertaken by members on the 2nd of August, and the minutes from the meeting are included within the reports pack in front of you. I'll just quickly run through it. You can see here is the site outlined in red here. These are the site photographs, and obviously members will have seen the site when they visited. Here are the existing elevations, the existing floor plans, the proposed elevations where you can see the 2-storey rear extension, and the proposed floor plans, and then just a reminder about the overshadowing that's not deemed to be a significant impact versus what already exists. And the application is recommended for approval as set out. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for agreeing to go on a site visit for this one. I think it's important when residents mention that they've got a problem about being overlooked and different things in the street scene. Having gone along, it's a shame really that it's not a single-storey extension that's going on the back of this property, but we can't govern what the applicant puts in for their planning permission. So unfortunately, it's one of those situations. I have great sympathy with the residents who look onto this flank wall, but I don't think there's anything that we could do in a planning scenario that can refuse it.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? No, I therefore move over to Vice Chairperson, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I move approval with conditions 1 to 5 as set out in the report. So move.
Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Those for?
That's 13, Chair.
The application is therefore approved. Thank you. Moving on to item 8 on the agenda, planning application for 63 Woodlands Road. Peter Hockney, Service Manager, is going to present this application. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Chairperson. This application site relates to 63 Woodlands Road, which you can see there on the junction there with Woodlands Road running broadly sort of north to south. And then it's sort of Cornwallis and Canada Avenue that run through. The application site that's proposed to be developed is the area of hard standing to the rear of the existing building located in this location. And again, you can see the context of the surrounding development being predominantly residential, although the existing building on the front part of the site has a convenience shop at ground floor level with residential above in the form of 6 flats above. So the proposal is to redevelop that area for 7 studio flats across 3 floors. You can see here the area of hard standing at the moment to the rear of the main property, and again views back to the junction on Woodlands Road. This is the rear of the property which exists at the moment. And one of the key considerations of this application was the impact on the residents of these flats. So looking at this rear elevation, you've got two windows here which serve the stairwell of the block, and it's a communal stairwell, so it's not habitable rooms at all. You can just see the edge of the windows in that location beyond this projection. Those windows are bathroom windows, so again, not habitable. And these two, which are obviously adjacent to the start of the row of terraced properties along Woodlands Road, are bedroom windows. So those are, in terms of amenity, the most critical windows when considering obviously the redevelopment of the area in front. So here's the block plan that shows how the site will be laid out. So you'll have 3 studio flats on the ground floor, each with their own entrance and some defensible space along the front behind a small garden wall. And that will obviously address the street and provide that active frontage. The windows and door here are the only source of light to these studios. Now that was of some concern, but I'll get on to the detail of that a bit later in the presentation. The 4th door here will be the entrance to the upper floors and the flats that will be above. The right-hand side again shows the 1st floor, so you can see the stairs coming up from the communal entrance, which is that corner, and then up to this communal corridor with then entrance to 1 studio flat here and 1 studio flat in this location. And then in terms of, as I say, the view from the street, this will be the view with the flank of the building that fronts Woodlands Road, and again the sort of end of terrace which then goes continues on to the right there. You can see from this street scene that the proposed building fits into the streetscape in terms of the overall ridge height, and that was something that we sought to seek amendments on, because when originally submitted it was higher than this property and didn't respect the sloping nature of the road and thus the sloping nature of the developments as you went down the road. So that has been amended then to fit in with that street scene a bit more and to respect the overall character. You can see again here the 3 front doors to the three flats. The 1st floor windows to the flat studio flats there, and then these windows will serve the flats on the 2nd floor, which we'll see the floor plans on shortly. In terms of the flank elevations, this flank will be facing the property that fronts Woodlands Road. So again, you can see the window there, which is the stair core window, will essentially be almost opposite the stair core window of the other property. And other than that, there are no upper floor windows in that flank elevation. And this flank elevation again shows the flank that will be facing the row of terraced properties. This line here is obviously the building which fronts Woodlands Road, and these windows here are the bedroom windows that are referred to previously with the photographs. And you can see that the building, the rear building line of the development doesn't encroach onto the windows to those bedrooms. This plan also shows again the terraced properties along Woodlands Road, and you can see here this is the boundary of the application site, and this rear wall at first floor level and then beyond is set approximately 4.5 metres from that boundary line, and that's obviously then ensures that any impact on these sort of windows, upper floor windows, particularly of the terraced properties, that there's no unacceptable impact from the positioning of that rear wall. The rear of the property here, so these, you have windows at first floor level, so these two are within the communal hallway. This window is within the hallway of the flat at first floor. If I take you to the floor plans there. So there you've got the first two windows in the communal corridor, this window within the hallway of this flat here, and then the end window is a secondary window for the kitchen. So again, that provides some light, but the purpose of these four windows is to have them obscure glazed to prevent any overlooking to the rear gardens of the terraced properties, which again you can see the outline of here, which front onto Woodlands Road. Along the roof, you've got solar panels proposed, or PV panels are proposed towards the rear top portion of the roof, and again 4 roof lights that are proposed to go in to serve the units on the second floor. The cross-section here has been undertaken because we did have concerns about the potential overlooking of the rear gardens from these. The applicant then did raise them further, so the sill level of these roof lights are 1.8 metres above the floor level. Now, typically the standard that we would require, and indeed the standard that's set out in permitted development rights for sort of context, is 1.7 metres. So it's above what is normally required in order to secure privacy. This diagram here again shows the viewpoint from the bedroom windows of the main property, and shows the viewpoint there. You can see that there that some of the essentially a 45-degree view from that is obscured by the existing projection which serves the stairwell. But here you can again see that with the setback and also the distance of over 5 metres between the flank wall here and the position of these windows, that there would be still adequate outlook and light to these habitable bedroom windows. This again shows the view from that window which the applicant submitted. The lines are relatively faint on these, but I think in sort of days gone by you'd have asked them to press a bit harder on with the pencil. But I think you can see here the rear rear wall of the proposed building, and obviously the remaining outlook that would be received from that window. So we're satisfied that the concerns that we did have in terms of those that amenity have been addressed with that information. Again, I won't run you through the floor plans of the ground floor and first floor again, because we did those on the block plan. This is the second floor. So again, you can see essentially 2 identical studio flats here. And again, the main window to the front, and again, the roof lights that we saw, one serves the bathroom for each property, and one is again above the kitchen to obviously allow some ventilation into that, as well as a bit more light. Now this is a sort of a light assessment for the properties and to ensure that the future occupiers had sufficient light, with particular concerns regarding the ground floor units because of the single aspect nature of them, and the conclusion of the assessments is that they all far exceed the minimum requirements of those standards. So again, we're satisfied that we requested that from the applicants, and they went out and got that study undertaken, and as I say, it demonstrates that they've complied with those requirements. And you'll see from the report that they meet the space standards as well in terms of the development. Obviously, with the site and the block plan, there's no car parking proposed as part of the development. It's in a relatively sustainable location within Gillingham. It's about 20 minutes walk from the station, and the size of the units themselves, because they are relatively small studio units, they're unlikely to be occupied by more than one person, and indeed there is a lower likelihood of car ownership as a result. So, as I say, when we're looking at it on balance, in terms of what the proposal is, that we've requested amendments and further clarification which has been submitted, and that we would achieve 7 additional units on a brownfield site within the urban area to go towards the housing supply. With all that in the balance, we are recommending approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Any member? Councillor Howcroft-Scott.
Sorry about this. Thank you very much. Just a bit alarmed, really, in terms of the lack of outside provision, really. Did I miss any kind of green space or gardens? Bins for recycling, cycle provision. I know this area very well because I attend some SEN meetings and other things in this area. And parking is absolutely premier, really. And, you know, it is kind of risky in terms of, from my mind, an overdevelopment, really. I notice on page 88 that you've had some letters of objections about overlooking rear gardens. Could I just have maybe a sentence about what's been done about that? The only thing I really like about this development is the solar panels. And the fact it's a brownfield site and I don't have to have a moral dilemma about building on green space. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you. Yes, in terms of the overlooking of rear gardens, that was where we looked at the heights of the roof windows, the roof lights at second floor level, to ensure that those sill levels were at a height that couldn't be looked out of. So that was the purpose of getting those in and getting the cross section for that development, and also to, as I say, the applicant actually raised that slightly to sort of confirm that element as well. In terms of cycle storage, there is secure cycle storage on the ground floor in this location with side access just between the two properties. So the Woodlands Road development also has a similar store essentially on the other side of what will be this access position. And again, the bin store is located behind that and in there with the relatively sizable bin store for seven units. In terms of the ground floor flats, they also have the ability to have a cycle. There is a store at the back which is large enough to fit a cycle in, if indeed those are all taken by the upper floor flats.
Thank you.
Is there any other points?
You've answered the bins. What about the green space?
Oh yes, in terms of green space, the site is a very constrained site, so there's no outdoor amenity space provided as part of the development. It's, as you can see from the, if I go back to the block plan here, because of the nature of the site, if we did look at, well, should we be getting some terrace properties in with gardens? But I think due to the sort of land changes, trying to make best use of the land on previously developed land within urban areas, it is that balance. And we didn't feel that was sufficient in order to warrant a reason for refusal on this when you balance everything up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Don't have any problem with an infill site like this. The only query I've got is you mentioned about lifting the height of the windows on the second floor. I don't think that fits in the fire regs, but it might be worth checking.
I think because the windows are secondary windows, and because it's a one-room studio flat, the fire windows would be the front windows, which are the larger ones.
All right. If you got both ends, fine.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Chair. Can I have an update referencing page 89? Southern Water proposal will be built over an existing foul sewage. Pipework could be diverted. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And this sentence, this has been forwarded to the applicant for attention, and he will be an informative on any decision. I'm quite sure I quite get that language, but please.
Okay, Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, in terms of the agreement between a developer and Southern Water, that would be a matter outside of the planning process. That would be a different regulatory process that they would need to go through. My understanding from discussions that we've had with the applicant is that the sewer or the pipework referred to isn't in the location where Southern Water think it is. And again, that's one of the reasons why it's not within the planning process to sort that element out. It is very much their own regulatory process.
Councillor Firm.
Yep. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Like Councillor Firm said, sort of support the infill. I don't share your view in terms of the parking though, and sort of being presumptuous that there won't be the need for cars because it's going to be single occupancy and etc. etc. We're already taking away car parking spaces, aren't we, for the existing block of that's there. So only a comment. I have no issue with the design. I think the design's fine. Fits the land fine. But my point is, it's a little bit disappointing that there is no parking. We're just moving the problem on, potentially 5-6 cars.
Any other member? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. I pass this area quite regularly, and the existing area behind the retail shop, I believe it's a hairdresser to start with, there's quite a few vehicles parked on this area that you're going to build this further development. So you've got those to consider parking. You've got the people that are going to move there that are likely to have cars. And I say I often pass by because Canadian Avenue, I've recently had a call there, and I had to refuse to be able to sort of supply a carpet to them because it is just passing by, because you've got dropped curbs where you've got access, you can't just park there. But double yellow lines, there's nowhere to park in Canadian Avenue. When I did do the call, I probably went round 3 or 4 times before I could sort of park anywhere some distance from the place. And the parking is going to be a major issue, for all the residents, not just the people affected by this development. Thank you.
Was there any other member? No. So I had some concerns with this as well. One of them being the overbearing for the houses on Woodlands Road. How will the light impact, say, 61 Woodlands, for instance, where it's going to go all the way up the side of the garden?
Yeah, so in terms of the property that faces Woodlands Road, so that would be this property here is as I say, the end property there. And the distance between essentially the the side garden fence of this property and essentially anything above ground floor level, so at first and second floor there, is 5.5 metres set back. So in terms of an overbearing element, that distance is sufficient so that it wouldn't result in an unacceptable overbearing. Again, in terms of the layout and the rear views from these properties, because of, say, the obscure glazed nature of those windows and the conditions proposed to ensure that those are maintained, that also negates any impact on privacy levels as well. Thank you.
Okay, it was also the loss of car parking that concerned me, because as mentioned, there is already a shortage in the surrounding area. And if you look back on one of your photos, you can also see, it was near the beginning, that a lot of it is double yellow lines all around there. And as was mentioned from Councillor Barrett, on Canadian Avenue, it is a lot of drop curbs, just like Chicago. There's limited parking on Woodlands, so that concerns me, because that car park is used at the moment, so they're losing their car parking. With more studio flats, there's going to be more parking, and as Councillor Barrett said, you can't park there as it is. It also mentions about the council housing standards require either external open space or balconies. So not only is external space going to be lost for the existing flats, if this planning application is approved, there'll also not be any external space or balconies for the proposed studio flats. So this concerns me quite a bit as well. and the main living spaces to the proposed development face north over Cornwallis Avenue, therefore will have the reduced sunlight. And the existing flats at 63 Woodlands Road having suddenly blocked by that new proposed building. That concerns me. It just seems too much packed into a site. And then there was bin storage, but that was already mentioned. Is the bin storage inside as part of the building? Yeah, okay, thank you. If you've got any comments, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was the concerns you raised were very similar to the concerns that we raised at the start of the application. The applicant did undertake a parking survey to look at the pressure. In terms of the average parking occupancy, that was 88%, and therefore could take some additional stress according to the surveys that were undertaken. There is in terms of the existing properties, whilst that is an area which, as I say, you could argue is linked to that property or those flats, I wouldn't go so far as to argue that that's that sort of amenity space that they could enjoy. I don't think that would be, we would be able to argue that those, the loss of this area would result in the removal of amenity space for those properties. And again, the issues with particularly the impact on the properties that do face Woodlands Road. Those were ones that we were raising, and as I say, have been addressed with that that obscure glazed nature and the heights of the windows at second floor level. And then on this photo here, again, you can see the windows, as I say, that face onto where the building will be built. The two that are closest and will be most affected are the stairwell to those properties, so they're not within flats, let alone habitable elements within those. The next two along here, just obscured by the projection, are the bathrooms, and it's these two which are the bedrooms, which, as I say, when you look at that and you look at how the development has been designed, it's a constrained site. It is a very difficult development to bring forward, but it's one that, as I say, to my mind, they have thought about the constraints and addressed those as best they can on that development. Again, the light in terms of the elements that are sort of facing, I think you said north facing onto Canada Avenue again, it was again a concern that we raised, and the specialist report has come back that states that it meets those standards. So I share your concerns to a large degree. It's ones that we've raised ourselves, and it is that balance of that range of issues, and also making best use of land, redeveloping brownfield sites in light of a lack of 5-year supply of housing. So, as I say, it's not. I think, as sort of Dave said, one of the earlier applications, I'm not going to stand here and say it's a wonderful scheme and it will win awards, but I think it's an acceptable scheme and goes some way to deliver the housing that we need to deliver in a different and relatively innovative way in terms of how they've looked at the site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I'm not quite sure how they come to that it's only 88% capacity for the parking. It's the amount of times that I wanted to stop at that shop when passing. I've driven around and can't park anywhere. So to me, it's sort of like 100% capacity. And if you're talking about a 15-minute walk up the top of Woodlands Road, yeah, there's parking there. Sorry, Councillor Pearce, did you have something?
Yeah, just quickly, Chairperson. My issue with this application is that what we've got there with the flats, which was approved on appeal with that car parking area, that was taken into account to render that application sustainable. And with this application, it's removing that. So in my mind, I'm thinking, does this make what's there now unsustainable? Because it was deemed sustainable at the time when the parking was part of that application. So I think, from my perspective, I can't support this because I don't think that what's proposed is sustainable, but also I think this renders what's already there unsustainable as well because the parking area was taken into account when that decision was made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Any other member? Oh, yeah, this application doesn't fit comfortably with me, so I feel that, I'm going to vote against it, but I now hand over to Vice Chairperson, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I move approval with conditions 1 to 10 as set out in the report and note the officer comments on the informative about foul sewage. Thanks very much. I so move.
Those for? Oh, sorry, is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Those for?
That's 5, Chair.
Those against?
That's 8, Chair.
Thank you. The application is therefore refused.
Chair, do we have to have some grounds for refusal?
Yes, sorry.
Chair, thank you. I was just about to say the same thing as Councillor Jones, that we need reasons for refusal. I've been noting down the debate, carefully listening to Peter's response and members' response to Peter's response. My feeling here is if I'm reading the room right, the overriding concerns relate to car parking, an overdevelopment of the site due to the loss of existing car park and no car parking with the proposed ones, and also the lack of external space for the flats, unless I've missed something there.
And I think smelling sewage has got to be undesirable.
I think I don't think we. I understand that. I don't think that's a planning reason for refusal because I think, as Peter says, that can be addressed through Southern Water. So I would suggest overdevelopment linking to that car parking issue and your point about the lack of external space, Councillor Howcroft-Scott.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's really rude, but due to disability, could I have a 2-minute comfort break, please?
Yeah, if we...
Do you want me to move,
We'll just
Chair?
vote after this. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chair, to have interrupted you. Shall I move that then, that this committee supports refusal on the grounds of overdevelopment in terms of car parking space and also external space, as the Chief Planning Officer and members have set out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Is that seconded? Thank you. Right, those for?
That's 9, Chair.
Those against?
That's 3, Chair.
Thank you. The application is therefore refused.
Sorry, Joe, I was just going to say the final wording to be agreed with the planning spokes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. We're now going to take a 5-minute break. back. We're now moving on to item 9 on the agenda, which is the performance report. Dave Harris, Chief Planning Officer, is going to present on this. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Chairperson. Members, you get this report on a quarterly basis, and I think it's important that you see the performance of the committee and my planning team. I'm proud of both. Going through this, number of applications received and determined. So this is the quarter that we're looking at. If that continues for the rest of the year, will be similar really to last year. Percentage of major applications determined against the performance target. So overall here you're looking at national target there, applications not subject to an extension of time, applications which have been subject to extension of time, and overall it comes to 87.5%, so well above the performance target. Minor applications, again this is the quarter we're looking at here. Performance is 98% overall against a target of 70%. And in relation to others, overall performance is 96.55% against a target of 70%. So this looks at income, really important to me in terms of the budget. You can see last year in terms of the yellow, we picked up towards the end. We've had an average start. I'm hoping that we'll be at least where we were in terms of 22-23. If we can get to where we were in 21-22, that will be great in terms of income. This shows our planning applications determined within the statutory time frame for major, minor and others, comparing us to other local planning authorities. So we're the orange, so performance has been pretty good. Just taking out those where we've had to agree an extension of time, either a PPA or a planning extension. You'll see again performance is pretty good there compared to other authorities. Majors we're slightly down on, but that's more of us making sure that we get the quality right on there. Just while we're looking at that performance and members, you ask me quite often in terms of the vacancies that we're carrying in the team. At the moment, we're carrying a planner vacancy in development management. We are short of a derelict and empty properties officer. We're out to advert on that. Unfortunately, due to ill health and someone leaving, I'm short of both a conservation officer and a senior conservation officer. My urban design officer, fortunately not Duncan, has left, so we're out to advert for that post. We've just appointed a landscape officer. We've just appointed a second tree officer, and we're out to advert, we're shortly be interviewing for a principal project and programme officer for the planning policy team, and we're considering whether we fill the vacant post for the vacant flood officer post. In relation to planning performance agreements I've touched on, we use them to cover the costs quite often where we have to use specialist consultants, ecologists, people who are specialists in environmental impact assessments, those sort of things we cover through PPAs. So this here shows how we're performing against other authorities, and this is something that the last government brought in as a way of measuring performance of planning authorities. Percentage of decisions granted, percentage that we needed to have an extension of time, so 88%, not bad. It shows we're a pretty positive authority, but we're not a walkover. We need to get the quality right. Percentage with extension of time, we want a low figure there, and we have a pretty low figure. Percentage of major developments decided within 13 weeks, we're at 40%, which is good, but I wouldn't want to be much higher than that because major applications take time to get right. Non-major applications within 8 weeks, 56%. Household development, we should be getting up to 80, 85, 90% there, and we are well above other authorities on those, so that's great. Appeals, we've talked about that tonight. We're talking a little bit further. One of the things that we need to be aware of there and just be cognizant of is if more than 10% of appeals are allowed, compared to the number of applications submitted for major or non-major, then we may have our planning powers taken away. Now, at the moment, we have 2.9% of majors compared to the number of applications we received are allowed, so we're well below the 10%, but we need to keep an eye on that. In relation to non-majors, we're under 1%, so that's good. I do like to keep an eye on appeals being allowed. We have a local target of 30%. Above that, that means that we need to look carefully in whether we're making decisions which are running contrary to what the government are saying. We lost 42.85% of appeals in the last quarter, but we'll come on to those ones shortly. Other things that were members you'll see from the report in front of you, open digital planning, looking to how we can use AI and other computer-generated things to help us, particularly in relation, or in terms of IT, particularly in relation to things like, do I need planning permission? We've got a new process online now, which people can go into, they can go through it, and they can answer a series of questions, and it comes up with an answer at the end, whether they require planning permission or not. Now, 110,000 people have so far used that, and 96% have been very happy to use it. We're also trying to improve the way that we get people to report planning breaches. Again, utilising IT, so people have to go through a series of questions that basically make sure that we get all the information we need, one, to ensure that there is a breach of planning control, and two, so we've got the information necessary to investigate it. Since we introduced that, the number of invalid reports that my team have had to deal with has reduced by 23%. So that's freeing up my team to get on and do those investigations. So that's really, really good. And we are leading the way in the country on that. We are one of only 4 authorities in the country that have introduced both these things. In terms of applications under construction, you'll have heard Pete and me talking about 5-year housing land supply and so on. You will see how we've worked hard, you've worked hard to try and grant permissions, and we can see that quite a number of properties are under construction. However, when we look at completions, which is what we're judged on, that's our requirement through there. They're the completions through the years, so we've done really well, improving from 647 in 1819 through up to the thousands up to now. Still means we're not meeting our need. And again, members, you know from the presentations I've given, that shows the need for a local plan. This shows how we compare to other authorities. And members, again, you will have a presentation from me in a few months' time on the new MPPF. Other authorities' housing target has gone up significantly as a result of the new way of calculating the standard methodology, which is out to consultation. It's not in force yet. Ours has gone down marginally, but other authorities has gone up significantly. Enforcement, credit to Pete here, since he's been in working with the team. We're serving more enforcement notices now, and I think Councillor Howcroft-Scott said earlier about how she dislikes retrospective applications. I think Councillor Bowler always said that those very comments at Planning Committee. If we have an effective enforcement team, it's very much discouraging those retrospective proposals. Team working really hard. Got one tree officer and a consultant working through all the applications they're receiving. We've seen a dramatic increase in them in recent months. And you'll all know Gabby, my flood officer, and all the hard work that she does. Councillor Howcroft-Scott, you'll have experienced the incredible work that she's been doing with local residents there. Complaints and compliments. We work in a process where someone is unhappy. Either the applicant, if they get a refusal, or objectors, if they get if there's an approval. Most people, after they have the process explained to them, reluctantly accept it. Some go through stage 2, some go to the Ombudsman. We've got a very good record with the Ombudsman in terms of demonstrating that we've gone through proper process and have made an informed decision. So, Chairperson, that's the performance report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Any member? Councillor Howcroft-Scott.
Yes, I'm really impressed with some of the comments on page 121, especially the Chatham Design Code is one of the best planning documents I've ever seen. Congratulations to the whole team. It's a monumental achievement. And I think your team are awesome. They make it, you know, I'm only subbing, but it makes it easy to understand because planning is interesting, but it's not my skill. And also, you know, the presentations and pictures really do help me. So thank you all so much. What a team. Awesome.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Field. Oh, sorry, Jones.
Yes, I think Councillor Field might be stretched to be here today, Chair. I just wanted to reiterate Councillor Howcroft-Scott's comments, and I mean, if I can illustrate this in terms of complaints and compliments, we as ward councillors are likely to hear the complaints, and of course there's no harm in an organisation having complaints. We learn from them, but we should also bear in mind the compliments, and I think the Chief Planning Officer is quite right to highlight that. I mean, a couple of questions I had, and once again thanks to all the staff, all the employees. I'm sorry we've lost some people. There's an issue there perhaps about retention, which is wider than this committee, but a couple of questions I did have. First, returning to the question of complaints, do we ever have complaints about non-determination, or do these tend to go to appeal? And the second question I had was my usual one, are we keeping up with the 90% of planning decisions being taken by council officers, as has always been the requirement under successive governments, central government's requirements that 90% are delegated. Ought to be even easier to meet that target now. We've altered the delegations for the committee. So those were my only two points, Chair.
Thank you. Dave, do you have any comments?
Chairperson, in terms of the second question, yes, we have, and I've got to say the recent change to the scheme of delegation has helped greatly. Probably helped you as well, because we had one committee where we did no applications on that committee, so you had a free Wednesday evening. But I didn't quite grasp your first question, Councillor Jones. If you could repeat that, apologies.
It was anecdotal, really. I didn't expect you to come up with there have been two of this and one of that. But in terms of non-determination, do applicants tend to go to appeal, or do applicants occasionally complain, or both?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, both, I think, is the answer. Sometimes, if they feel there's been an unreasonable delay in the processing of the application, they will come back they will complain to me, and I will speak to the case officer and find out why there's been a delay. 99% of the time, there's good reason why there's been a delay in processing it. Quite often, it's the applicant hasn't done something. But as you say, others where we'll take things to appeal. I am really grateful to Councillor Howcroft-Scott and yourself, Councillor Jones, in terms of thanking staff. I'm really, really proud of my staff. Jonathan here today, I received a compliment about him from a really grumpy agent who's never thanked anybody before and was effusive about the service he'd got from Jonathan. And you know Pete and Mary really, really well and how exceptional they are. So thank you for your comments. I'm really, really proud. I'm very lucky for the staff I've got. Thank you.
Councillor Gilbourne.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate, the congratulations to the team and to Dave, because they are excellent stats, certainly in comparison to all the other authorities. But my question, I suppose, is just with the new national administration and what the Deputy Prime Minister has said, what is your understanding about how some of this could change over the next few years in terms of wanting numbers to be boosted and the speed of processing? Because every government always say they want to speed up planning and they always have new proposals, but it doesn't always happen. So I just wonder what your thoughts are.
That's a really good question. We could probably debate it all night, yeah, Councillor Gilbourne. I think we will see coming forward is the answer. One of the things that they are very clear about is numbers, and they've removed the poor word that was used before in terms of advisory, because that always caused me some difficulties, because the government were privately saying to me, you've got to deliver, you know about housing delivery tests. We were penalised if we didn't meet those targets, but publicly they were saying, oh, they're advisory. So I then had the public then moaning at me saying, well, you don't have to build these houses, do you, Mr. Harris? So I was getting hit from both sides. So I think whilst there are people will have views in terms of the number of that come out of that formula, I think the fact that it's very clear that it's a mandatory requirement, that helps me because I can plan for that then. And I can blame someone else, which is also good. In relation to changes to the planning processes, I'm working my way through the MPPF consultation at the moment. I think what I would say to that is I'll get to you all together in a couple of months. We'll go through that consultation, what the implications are, and we may have a little bit more clarity from the government in terms of other changes by then. That's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there any other member? No? Oh, sorry, Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just quickly, I'm following what's happening nationally in terms of the MPPF, and as the Chief Plan Officer says, that there's absolute clarity around the numbers. It's not advisory, that's the housing numbers that authorities will be told that you need to build. Although, as we know, it's not the authorities that actually build, it's developers that build. My understanding is that this housing target, which the new administration nationally has set, will be predominantly privately led, and we've had privately led development for decades, so I can't see what will actually change in terms of delivery unless we start to nationally do social and old-fashioned council housing. We're not going to see any significant difference, I think. And if you look at, I can't remember the graph, but if you look at the graphs and the data, it basically indicates that the problem started when we stopped building proper council housing and affordable housing. That's where the issue began. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Any other member? No. I'd just also like to reiterate what everyone else says about your staff. You are a fantastic team. You work really hard and appreciate everything that you do. Okay.
Thank you. I'll pass on to the staff.
Thank you. Cheers. Now handing over to Vice Chairperson, Councillor Jones.
It sounds to me as though the committee is in a considerable degree of agreement on this, Chair, and the recommendation is 1.1. The Planning Committee is asked to consider and note the report which is submitted to assist the committee in monitoring planning activity, which we have done. Thank you, Chair.
Is that seconded? Those for?
That's 13, Chair.
Thank you. The report is approved. Now moving over to item 10 on the agenda, the appeals. Dave Harris is going to present on this. Thank you.
Chairperson, thank you very much. As members know, rather than a reporting on all appeal decisions, which was always a long process, we now just report on those appeals which have been allowed, or those appeals where members made a contrary decision to officers on that. So the first is 9 to 15 Railway Street, Gillingham. This is the site just in here in red. So you've got these properties fronting Railway Street. It's an old, well, it was a car park, as you can see in here. and you can see the properties at the back which face over it. And this was a proposal for these properties in here. Now, the planning committee struggled with this, and I can understand why they struggled with it. It's a tight site. It's a contrived site. You could say it was loss of car parking, but the car parking was never associated with adjacent development. So members struggled with it. They went for refusal in the end, contrary to officer's recommendation. In hindsight, and hindsight's always a wonderful thing, because it was allowed by the inspector, but the inspector also awarded costs against the council because he said that we couldn't defend our reasons for refusal adequately. Possibly in hindsight we should have gone for a deferral for members so that we could have looked at what evidence we have to substantiate or not the concerns that members have. But I totally understood the difficulty members had with that decision. And the second one, we've got Maryboy's House at Cliff Woods. This is an enforcement appeal. The gentleman in here, I've battled with him for 30 years in relation to this site, where when he gets bored, he'll do something which doesn't got planning permission, and I have to send my officers out or go out and meet him myself and deal with those issues there. In this occasion, he'd constructed 3 buildings without planning permission and put up a huge fence along this side here. We served an enforcement, so that's the fence that he put up. We served an enforcement notice on him requiring the fence to be removed, requiring the buildings to be removed. The inspector looked at this, felt that the fence was unacceptable, so we won that part of the appeal. He's got to take that down. In relation to the buildings, the inspector took the view that the buildings themselves were okay, but the link buildings between them were not. So he said the buildings can stay provided those link buildings are removed. So we won the enforcement notice in relation to that fence and the link buildings. Then in relation to the Green Lion, High Street, Raynham, so this is the site here, the old car park that served the Green Line, which is closed, residential development on the back. So you can see where the old car park was. And that's the site. And that was proposed, this residential development in here with this car parking. Inspector understood the reasons for refusing it and the difficulties with the access there, but on balance felt that the development was acceptable and allowed the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member? No. So now move over to Vice Chairperson, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Chair. I shall try not to interrupt you at meetings in future so that you remember who I am. In terms of this, I believe that the committee is being asked to consider and note the report. That is what I shall propose. Thank you very much indeed, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Those for... Oh, second. Is that seconded, first of all?
Seconded.
Thank you. Those for...
That's 13, Chair.
Thank you. The report is approved. Thank you, officers and members. That is now the end of tonight's Planning Committee meeting. Thank you.